So if you have employees, you're required to pay the employee, but you also are required to withhold income tax as well as Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance. And all of that goes to Canada Revenue Agency. So I thought I'd use an actual pay stub to go through the journal entries that you would make. So I'm just on the Canada Revenue Agency's website, and I'm just using their online calculator, and we'll just go through this very basic calculation. So I'm just going to assume that I'm paying a salary. And it's in British Columbia, so I want provincial tax on there as well as federal tax. And then I'm just going to assume my pay frequency is monthly. And let's just say we're doing this for the end of this month, so November 30th. And I have to put the $10,000 in, so $10,000. I'm not going to include vacation pay just because if they have salary, they get time off in lieu of vacation pay. And this can get more complicated the more stuff you have to take off, so we'll just ignore all of this and just click next. And I'm just going to use the minimum claim code for our TD1 form. So this is the minimum amount that they would take off for income taxes. And we'll assume that we still have to pay CPP and we'll still have to pay EI. So throughout the year, if the employee makes enough money, if they max out off their CPP of 2748.9 and their EI of 860.22, then the employer stops collecting it. So then that's all they need to collect from them. And the employer is also responsible for remitting 1.4 of what the employee has to pay in EI, and then they have to match what the employee has to pay in CPP. So we'll just calculate this. So let's just explain this before I do the journal entries. So the employee earned $10,000, and that's known as the gross pay. And our federal and provincial tax deductions ended up being $2496.65. So we're not allowed to give that money to the employee. What we have to do is claw it back, and we have to give it to Canada Revenue Agency. Also, the employee is responsible for paying CPP of $495.13 and EI of $162. So again, the employee doesn't get this, we'll claw it back, and then we'll remit it to Canada Revenue Agency. So if you make $10,000, the company has to deduct the total of those three, which is 3153.78. So when you give the employee their check, or if you deposit it directly into their bank account, they'll only see $6,846.22 of that. So let's go ahead and make these journal entries. So I'll do the salary expense for the gross wage. So that's $10,000, and that's a debit. That will show up on your income statement. And now I'm going to credit my income tax withholdings. So I'll just keep it the same as the book. So employee withholdings, income tax payable, and that amount came to the 2496.65. So that was the federal and provincial tax that we withheld. And then the CPP payable is the 495.13 that we withheld, and also the EI payable is the 162 that we withheld. So in total, we're going to pay this employee that net pay. So the 6846.22. So I'll just say to record payroll. Okay, but remember what I said about the CPP and the EI? not only does the employee have to pay that, the employer also has to pay that. So I'm going to debit CPP and EI expense. And I'm going to credit CPP payable again. And I have to credit an additional $495.13. And then I'm going to credit EI again. And not the 162. Remember what I said about EI? You take 1.4. So the employer is responsible for paying 1.4 EI. So that's 226.8. And so then when I add those two together, the CPP and EI expense is 721.93. So I'll just say to record employer share of CPP and EI. So before I show you the journal entry to pay the taxes to Canada Revenue Agency, we can go to the employer remittance summary. And this is where it'll tell us how much we owe. So the CPP is the employee and employer's portion, and then the EI is the employee's portion, and then the employer's contribution. And so then the total taxes that were also deducted was the 2496.65. So in total, we have to remit to Canada Revenue Agency 3875.71. So this is the journal entry to do this. So all we're doing now is reversing all of our liabilities that we set up. So because I credited originally this employee withholdings, if I debit it for the same amount, so 2496.65, that'll bring that account to zero, which is what I want. And now I'm going to debit CPP payable. But I have to do that for the 990.26 because it's in here at 495.13 plus another 495.13. So if I want to reverse that out, it's a total of 990.26 to bring it to zero. And then I'm going to debit my EI payable. So again, it was the 162 and the 226.8. So that means if I debit that account by 338.8, that will bring that account down to zero. And then I can pay my cash, I add all those up, of 3875.71, which is exactly what it showed me on that remittance form on the online payroll. So I'll just say to record payment to CRA is just Canada Revenue Agency.